product specialist at Tailwind, and I'm very happy to have you here today. You may have noticed someone missing, Jeff C. Jeff C is here. He's behind the scenes today as we host a very special chat with all of you, and a representative from Pinterest, as well as my cat. So we are going to be talking today about some of the newer recommendations from Pinterest, how it's going to affect your workflow and how it can actually improve the success of your marketing. Please do share the love or spread the love. I shouldn't have said that word. By letting your friends know that we are live and we are eager to hear what you have to say in the comments. After Lucy is done speaking, we are going to share a Typeform link to a survey where you can put in all your questions, comments, thoughts, fears, aspirations, dreams, and we will make sure to compile those and share those thoughts with Pinterest as well as with our own team internally. So we are very anxious to hear from you and very happy to have you on today. So I know there was a little bit of a conference room crush over at Pinterest today, but there she is, perfect timing. Hey, this is Lucy Matthews, this is our partner. What are we calling you, Lucy? Partner manager?
Yeah.
Partnerships manager, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really happy to have you on.
Happy to be here.
Excellent. So let's just start off with the questions, shall we?
Great.
Yeah? All right, good. Okay. So Pinterest has been, I mean, the new recommendations are all about sharing fresh content, but Pinterest really has been encouraging creators to share fresh content for a while now. Why is that?
Yeah, so Pinterest's mission has always been to help empower people to discover things they love and then inspire them to actually go out into the real world, into real life and do those things. And what we found is pinners really love fresh content. It gives them these new ideas and inspirations to then go out into the world and actually do those things.
Okay. So has anything really changed then?
So the emphasis on fresh content is only growing with time as we see pinners responding more positively to fresh content. In addition, our algorithms for our home feed and search results really favor recent and relevant content.
Okay. So is this a change that I should have already noticed with newer content appearing in the feed, or is this something that's planned for the future?
A little bit of both. So it's already been underway, but is going to continue to do so as we move further into 2020 and beyond.
Okay. All right. So fresh content, important. Let's define fresh content. What is it?
It's a very good question. So the easiest way to think about fresh content is new images count as fresh pins. So the pin can still link to a blog post, a product listing, or a page on your website that already has a pin link into that URL. As long as the new image, as long as the image is new, it will count as fresh content.
Okay, that's pretty simple. But what if we just rewrite the pin description or title, or we use different hashtags? Is that considered fresh?
So it's okay to test new approaches to copywriting this way, but that alone will not count as fresh.
Okay. So then I know we're going to get this question. So how different does an image have to be in order to be called fresh? So for instance, would a new filter, a text overlay be okay? What about moving the background image a few pixels?
So this threshold will change over time, but making minor tweaks like that, like moving the background image a few pixels, that's not really the spirit of this. Thinking about A/B testing and different background images or text overlays, that seems like a valid strategy. My advice would be to really focus on creating unique images that are helpful and inspiring to pinners. The better you are at that, the more future-proof your process and strategy will be.
Okay, excellent. All right, so this is going to be a little bit more work than just resharing the same pin over again. So what can you say about the benefits of sharing more fresh content? Is fresh content actually performing better on Pinterest?
Yeah, so as I alluded to before, our algorithm really values recency and relevancy as key factors when we're thinking about content. So, what that means is the more recent, more relevant content will be distributed more and reach larger audiences in places like the home feed and search results in comparison to less relevant or stale content.
Okay, so then kind of on the flip side, what are the disadvantages to sharing duplicate or non-fresh content?
Yeah, so duplicate content will be distributed less or seen by smaller audiences compared to fresher content, if we're assuming the equal relevance there. And then
Hmm.
accounts that share far too much duplicate content could see suspension or penalties. Although don't panic, there's obviously a lot of factors that impact our spam fighting algorithms.
Okay, so the phrase there that kind of jumps out at me is far too much. So we do hear a lot of times from creators that I want to follow the rules, but I'm just not sure what they are. How do I know what qualifies as far too much sharing of duplicate content? Nobody wants to break the rules, Riddle.
Exactly, and that's an extremely valid question. Unfortunately, I don't think we never have and likely will not publish exact guidelines because we just can't. It would be published in a recipe for people looking to abuse the system.
Mm.
That said, we do work with our partners like Tailwind to help make sure their products guide pinners towards best practices and away from outdated or poor practices. And the new feature that you announced this morning is a really good example of how you'll be able to stay in line with good practices.
Awesome, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. So what if though? What if I've been resharing a lot of duplicate content and it's really working well for me still? Isn't it the case that like any kind of boost or any incremental gain in traffic or exposure is better than nothing?
Right. So we really understand the need for content creators to maximize their reach on each piece of content. And that some duplication is natural, but my advice is that in the long run, you'll be best to maximize your reach by focusing your time and energy on generating more relevant and fresh content for pinners.
Okay. So is it a problem then if a lot of people see my fresh content and then they repin it or share it from my website with the save button? Isn't that duplicate content and is that gonna get me penalized?
No, so this is
Okay.
perfectly natural behavior for pinners. We offer the save button to make it easier for pinners to save content off of Pinterest. And resaving on Pinterest is also a natural behavior for pinners. And it's
Okay.
actually really, really good if people want to save your content.
Excellent. Okay. So in the past, we've been instructed to save pins to all relevant boards. It gives more context to search and the algorithm. Is this no longer the case? Should we not share to all relevant boards?
So saving to the most relevant boards is even more important today.
Okay.
But if you're saving to many boards, it will be most impactful to use as many unique images as possible across those boards. And as pinners save your pins, we get lots of helpful signals to let us know what that pin is about and who it would be most relevant to.
Okay. Perfect. So what if I'm saving a pin to somebody else's content because I really liked it, I want to read it later, or I think it's high quality and really relevant to my own audience? Well, is that gonna get me in trouble because that pin is already on Pinterest?
No, so Pinterest is the place to save ideas, and this, is natural behavior for pinners, and it can be helpful if you think your audience will enjoy that piece of content. What we see is some creators just overdo it. They're spending too much time on curation of content and not enough time on creation of new content, or even ceasing to create new content at all. And that's not ideal.
Okay. So does that mean that I can never save the same pin or image of my own content more than once, ever?
No, so there's definitely a natural rate of duplication of pins and some very legitimate cases. So, for example, relevant seasonal content or periodic evergreen content. We understand the need for creators to get the value from the content that you've spent time and money creating. but would encourage as often as possible to create new images to support resharing a link.
Okay, great. So nothing ever stays the same, and we can assume that the best practices and recommendations are going to continue to evolve. So what is the best way for a creator to keep up to date with those changes?
Yeah, excellent question. So we do publish updates to our best practices from time to time, but we'll continue to work with our partners like Tailwind on this. So as a creator and a Tailwind user, if you have questions, just ask the team here at Tailwind. One of the ways they add value to us as a partner is gathering and synthesizing that type of feedback for us, so we know what we need to focus on clarifying for you.
Excellent. Speaking of clarifying, we had just a couple of follow-up questions. One is that Pinterest, and I think creators have really appreciated this, have always appreciated the long shelf life of a pin. Apologies. Are pins no longer living as long as they used to on the platform?
So not to fear, pins are still evergreen on Pinterest. And we are encouraging our users to invest in fresh content and be thoughtful about their creation strategy. So only repinning content that is truly valuable and relevant to users. Pins will still live on as evergreen content on the platform. Absolutely nothing is changing there. We are just working to ensure the best pinner experience, which means surfacing a variety of fresh content to engage with.
Okay. So what if I'm doing this and I notice that my fresh pins just really aren't taking off the way I thought that they might?
Yeah, so as a platform, we are constantly evolving to provide the best experience for our pinners and our creators. And our end goal is to ensure we are surfacing relevant, diverse content for our users and as a fast feedback loop so creators can quickly see returns on their published content. While we work towards this, however, there's going to be some learnings and iterations. But by learning about these changes now, as a Tailwind user, you are way ahead of the curve and best positioned to adapt your Pinterest strategy for ultimate success.
Oh, that's great. Okay. So here's kind of a little bit of a technical question. So we know that new images are great. Is there some preference given to new URLs shared to Pinterest?
Yeah, so while Pinterest does not necessarily give preference to newer links, newer pins likely feature content that is more timely and relevant and hence more likely to be useful to users.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, can we use the same pin description and pin title for a piece of content, but just refresh the image? Or does everything need to be brand new?
So, not exactly. When you're creating titles and want to use the best title and description for a pin that you can, both should reflect information about the pin and what can be expected when clicking through. So, titles and descriptions that don't accurately reflect an image or a landing page are really less valuable to pinners and will not perform as well.
That absolutely makes sense. Okay. Well, thank you so very much for spending this time with us today, and even more so for helping us at Tailwind to understand the best practices and how we can help users really to adapt to them, embrace them, and find more success with them. It's been a real pleasure, and I know it will continue to enjoy working with you. So thank you very much for coming, Lucy.
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for arranging this. Happy to be here.
Great. See you soon.
Bye.
Okay, so while we are waiting, we're going to be joined in a moment by Danny Maloney. He is the founder at Tailwind. But while we're waiting for him to pop in, we're going to share the link to that Typeform survey with you. And the link is bit.ly/Pinterest Live Feedback. That's all one word, all smashed together, no caps. And please, we'd love to have your feedback in there. Of course, we are monitoring the comments and we will respond as much as we possibly can. So while we're waiting for Danny, we have a print screen we wanted to share with you because I know like creating new content, obviously a lot harder than sharing old content over again, but you know what, it works. So we have a couple of examples and I just pulled this one out from my friend Jessica Boshin, Teachers Pay Teacher Seller. who had that image on the left there. And look at that. I mean, it's giving her 1,926 clicks. This was for a period of a month. And she just decided, well, I'll just remake this pin. She made the one on the right, a very simple pin, but a very clear message, just a different image and a slightly different text on it. Look what she got, 10,000 link clicks in that same time period. So, maybe 5 minutes to make a new pin, 10,000 more visitors to her website. Absolutely shows that it works. So again, thank you everybody for being here. Again, we're thrilled to have this opportunity to work with Pinterest to share these new best practices with everybody. And we're joined by Danny Maloney. Hey, Danny.
Hey, how's it going?
Great. I know you were off screen watching the whole thing, and I'm really eager to get your take on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I honestly, so I was watching the questions that were coming through as well, and I think there's a number of things that we can clear up as we continue to talk through some of those questions here. So thank you everyone for submitting the questions. Please keep doing it. Let's talk through it. And I understand a lot of the initial reactions and questions that are coming. Honestly, I think long-term, this is a pretty exciting change. And the reason I say that is one of the things I heard Lucy say just now was that pinners love fresh content. And what I interpret that to mean is that if there is a continued supply of fresh, new, interesting, relevant, and inspiring content, that ultimately is going to mean more engagement by pinners, which is going to grow the ecosystem for everyone, including creators. And so, I think about this as kind of the evolution of other channels over time. I don't know, my old boss that I used to work for back at YouTube had an analogy where he talked about when TV first came around, that a lot of people initially began repurposing radio content for TV, and it worked for a while, but then new formats were formed, and eventually, that's what took over. That's what people loved. That's what created the TV that we know today. And so I see a similar trend here, maybe, which is that, okay, we are now learning what pinners love and what they're engaging with. And so now the question is, how do we create more of that? And how do we continue to create highly relevant, but new and fresh content that people will continue to love for years to come?
Yeah, great point. It's really giving people what they expect on the platform that they're on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we've been talking about this for a while at Tailwind. So what is it that we're doing to help people to stay within these newer best practices, sharing more fresh content?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say is that's kind of how we view our role here. So, ultimately, we're on your team. We're here to help. We want to support you. Elisa, as you mentioned, as Lucy mentioned earlier, best practices will continue to evolve over time. This isn't the last new direction or new hint towards best practices that's going to come. And so at Tailwind, part of what we think about is how do we help our members roll with and adapt to those changes as easily as possible, not just from the perspective of, let's not do the wrong thing as that changes, but more importantly, let's do the right thing that's going to create a lot of engagement and a lot of positive interaction with pinners and ultimately help us all grow our businesses, right? That's the first thing I think is us just looking at this situation and saying, oh, great, this is an opportunity to help a lot of folks and to help navigate this change. In terms of how we're doing that, we're thinking of it in two phases, really. So phase one, as we think about it, is ultimately about helping people understand and adapt to the new best practices. And so maybe not everyone has started seeing this yet, but today we started rolling out a new feature called Smart Guide. And the very nature of that feature is essentially as you're using Tailwind in various parts, while drafting pins on your schedule page, while using Smart Loop and so forth, that Smart Guide is going to be able to give you real-time tips and hints and recommendations as to how to adjust what you're doing to fit with current best practices. And the way we've built that is such that we can continue to evolve and tweak those recommendations into the future. So as best practices continue to evolve, we can keep you up to date in real time as you're doing your thing, scheduling your marketing campaigns, building content and so forth. So that's phase one, is let's help understand and let's help adjust. Phase two for us is about helping to enable the creation of more high quality, fresh content in an easier way than most folks are able to today. So nothing to announce there today in terms of features, but I'd say just stay tuned. Our team's already actively working down that path as well, even as phase 1 is just kind of rolling out. But that's something you're going to be hearing a lot more from us as the year goes on.
That's very mysterious, Danny.
Sorry,
So,
I don't mean to be.
no, it's exciting. So tell me, what is Smart Guide doing like right now?
Yep. So some of the biggest things at the initial launch for Smart Guide is we're looking at some of the guidelines that we've gotten in discussions with our partners at Pinterest, and we're looking for patterns of pinning that might be deviating significantly from best practices. So that could include things like pinning far too frequently, pinning too much duplicate content. Some folks were asking about Smart Loop, so we actually have Smart Guide recommendations built into Smart Loop already, and so if there's any tweak to your Smart Loop schedules needed, you'll be getting notices directly within Tailwind. So you don't have to guess. We'll notify you if we're detecting something. But that's how to think of it. An analogy that I like to use that I find valuable in my own life is sort of like fraud alerts on a credit card. So every now and then I'll get a text message or an email from one of my credit card providers that says, we think there might be fraud. Something looks out of line. There's this transaction that doesn't look right. And even though it's kind of annoying in the moment, frankly, right? And I don't want that to happen in the first place. I'm really glad that they do alert me so I can take action and they can prevent bad things from happening on my account. So that's what this initial rollout of Smart Guide is focused on, is really notifying folks. The interesting thing here is the vast majority of Tailwind members will actually see an all clear notice in their dashboard. That's good news that a lot of folks are in a good zone already. And for anyone who is seeing recommendations to change, one of the big things I want to say there is, if you have questions, if you're concerned, please just reach out to us and let's talk about it. Our customer success team is literally working overtime right now to be available and to be able to get back to you as quickly as possible, because I'm sure we're going to get questions here. But we're here to support you through that. So if you are seeing any of those notifications, just let us know, right? Like, we're here to help. It's not something you have to figure out on your own.
Great. Okay. So that's what Smart Guide is doing right now. Do you want to talk a little bit more about what Smart Guide's going to do?
Sure. So there's actually a number of expansions of Smart Guide that are planned. The biggest one that I would think of is adding additional features to kind of move from protecting against the negative towards guiding towards the positive, right? So not just a matter of, how do I make sure I'm not tripping any rules or best practices here and going in the wrong direction, but more importantly, how can I do more? How can I generate more traffic? How can I reach my audience with more relevant content that they're going to love that's also fresh? There are some really interesting examples here. Folks were asking about Smart Loop, for instance, where we see some paths to actually update Smart Loop and add some additional intelligence there, where maybe we can do things like help identify which posts are ready for a content refresh, so that you can really focus your time and energy on creating new content in places where it's going to make a big impact, just as an example. So I think that's the biggest change that I would call out. And as we're going through those phases, one of the big questions is, how do we provide really actionable, easy to understand recommendations? So also I'd say, as you are working in Tailwind and if you start experiencing Smart Guide recommendations, again, a lot of folks are going to get an all clear and won't see anything initially. But if you do, we would also love to hear from you if you don't feel the recommendations are clear enough, if you want more guidance, if you want more direction. Like, that type of product feedback and messaging feedback is super helpful, so that we can help guide you in the best way possible.
Hey, Danny, you want to show some of those print screens?
Yeah, sure. We can flash those up.
Okay.
So I'm ready.
Which one do you want first?
I can go to any of them. Show me. Yeah.
Okay.
Whichever order you want to go in.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
So here's what most people see, right?
Yeah, exactly. This is an example of an all clear notification. So the little smart guide, the heart with a check or with kind of like a heartbeat signal in it is something that you'll want to look out for throughout Tailwind. That basically means this is part of the smart guide feature, which I didn't mention, but that's being included in all Tailwind Plus plans. So, there's no added cost for this. It's just an additional benefit and value add to the service. But that's how you know that a recommendation or a notice that you're seeing is coming from Smart Guide. So in this case, it's saying for your pinning frequency in particular here, you're in line with current best practices. We'll keep monitoring your account for opportunities. So here's an example of an all clear type of message.
Oh, great. Okay. And then we have another one. All right, spam safeguard action required. Is this Smart Guide as well?
Yes, this is Smart Guide. Again, we've got the heartbeat there, but it's lit up this time, right? So this is an indication that, oh, there's something here that you need to pay attention to or want to pay attention to. And there's kind of sub features within Smart Guide. So the spam safeguard is one of those sub features that's saying, okay, we've detected an action here which might put your account at risk of being flagged as spam, or Lucy mentioned that if folks are going overboard, right, like that's when they might see the risk of things like penalties or suspensions on accounts. We don't want any Tailwind members to fall into that bucket. We want to help you steer clear of that. So this would be an example of, okay, there's an action required, and click on this and figure out what you want to do.
Yes, and kudos to Melissa for sacrificing her account for these screenshots. Here we can see clearly we've got the identical pins, one right after another. So if I click on that notice there, I'm going to get more information, and it's going to tell me how to fix it.
Yeah, it's going to give you guidance on how to fix it. Again, this is an area just I personally want to highlight that if that guidance doesn't feel specific enough or you want more information, perfect type of thing, reach out to us. You've got the chat directly in Tailwind. You can email help@tailwindapp.com. That'll reach our customer success team. But especially, post-launch and rollout here, we're going to be really looking at that feedback hard and figuring out, okay, where can we make it clearer? Where can we improve things? So hopefully it's pretty clear already. If it's not, let us know. We want to hear that.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about a couple of the things that Lucy mentioned that I feel like people are going to have some extra questions about. So, and again, we do have that type form survey. So if we don't cover the question that you have, please do fill out that type form. We're going to share that with Pinterest, look at it ourselves. That's bit.ly/Pinterest live feedback, all lowercase, all one word. But we're going to cover a couple of them because we know you're going to have great questions. But one is, okay, no surprise, they wouldn't give us any numbers, right? We know they can't. We understand why. So can you give me numbers? How much duplicate content is too much? People just want numbers.
Yeah, I understand. And we can't really for two reasons, right? So the first one is it's not that simple, right? So you might have picked up when Lucy was talking about, how account penalties or suspensions could happen. She very quickly mentioned, okay, it's not just one factor, it's multiple factors that are being considered. And that's the truth, right? It would be a lot easier if it was just like, here's one number, stay within this number or guideline, or here are two numbers. And that's not the reality of how the system is working. So if we did give just a number, it would actually be misleading. It would be wrong. The other factor there is that number would almost certainly change over time. And so again, the way we had to approach building Smart Guide here was to account for that, to realize that these best practices are going to change. And so instead of overemphasizing a specific number or a set of numbers to stick within, it's really more the concept of, okay, we need to commit to continuing to evolve this feature over time, to keeping it in line with best practices, to continue working with our partners at Pinterest there. But that's more of the reality that it is going to be a constantly evolving type of system, which frankly is something we see across the whole web at this point. So we can't give a number for that reason. I mean, the other thing I will throw out there is one of the basic reasons why especially services and networks like Pinterest don't publish specific numbers there, in my opinion, is because if someone is trying to to take bad actions, or if they have ill intent, it actually kind of tips them off as to how to avoid detection as well. And that could be a very bad outcome for the ecosystem and a bad outcome for everyone, right? So, I wouldn't expect hard numbers to ever really be published. And similarly, we can't necessarily relay hard numbers. But what we can commit to ultimately is that we're going to continue evolving the recommendations to fit with the latest guidance and best practices we have at any point in time.
Great. Perfect. So, I feel like a lot of creators and pinners are going to be really kind of anxious about this call to focus on quality over quantity, because for one thing, it's more work, but also because for years we've been taught and we've heard that you have to pin a lot to see success on Pinterest. Mm-hmm. So how can they trust that these changes are accurate, that they're good, they're going to help them out?
Yeah, I think honestly that was the one of the big reasons why we felt it was so important to make sure that we're co-announcing this with Pinterest today, and it's not just coming from Tailwind or just coming from Pinterest, because we've definitely seen in the past, there's a lot published online. Folks don't always know what to trust, and so this way, we can point back to it and say, look, we're hearing directly from Pinterest that this is the strategy that's going to work increasingly over time. That this transition, while it's not going to be overnight, it's underway and it's expected to continue. So honestly, I think the really neat thing here is Pinterest is giving us a heads up, right? Like there could be an alternate universe where hard changes are just made and performance, changes in one direction or the other, and people are left guessing, trying to figure out what happened. In this case, they're giving us an indication that, hey, relevancy is still going to matter. It's not just recency, but in the balance of relevancy and recency, recency is going to become a bit more important over time. I think it's good. It's good that they're letting us know now, because ultimately we all want to be prepared to succeed for the long term. We want to help our members succeed for the long term. And I think the folks who learn how to adapt their strategy and their specific operations or practices within their business in order to be able to produce more fresh content than they're producing today while still being affordable and having a high ROI and so forth are the folks who are going to benefit in the long run, because they're going to be able to serve more pinners, and ultimately that's going to enable their own business to thrive as well. So I'm grateful that Pinterest is letting us know this in advance, but I think it's really important we're hearing from Lucy directly within this Facebook Live, and we're really grateful that they were willing to hop on and do that with us.
Absolutely. So what happens if somebody tries this new recommended approach and it doesn't work as well as their previous strategy?
Again, I would just come back to, we're hearing this is the right long-term approach, right? Honestly, we get questions a lot where someone, temporarily their performance jumps or drops and they're trying to figure out exactly why it happened. Sometimes there's an obvious answer, sometimes there's not. The main thing I would say here is, try not to overreact in either direction to, positive or negative to a near-term blip. Or what could be a near-term blip or variance. The more important thing here is we're being told, over the long term, it's got to be balanced, right? A 100% duplicate content strategy is not going to be good for the long term. Most folks don't do that already today, but there are definitely some that we see, have taken that approach. And so it's really about the right balance. And I think, again, with the Smart Guide feature, that's part of what we're going to be observing and looking for is, okay, how do we guide folks towards the right balance over time to make sure that they have a fresh, healthy content system flowing, that the content they're creating is in fact relevant, it is resonating with pinners, it is helping ultimately to help those people and to inspire them to do things in their lives. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. Is take the long-term view here is what I would encourage everyone to do. Frankly, that's what we're doing as well. As Tailwind, it's about taking the long-term view here and making sure that not only Smart Guide but additional features that are planned in development already are ultimately going to be aligning Tailwind with this direction and with this set of best practices, so that our members can align with it more easily as well.
Okay. Well, that's a great segue to my next question, which is talking about existing Tailwind products. I think the one that's probably going to come to mind for most people in this context is Smart Loop. So what does this mean for Smart Loop?
Yeah, so I guess a few points I'd like to call out here. So one is, we've been in touch with our partners over at Pinterest since we started developing Smart Loop, and so even before Smart Loop launched, we were already getting guidance on the right way to build that product, and there were a number of changes made to functionality or directions based on the feedback we got, which was super helpful. I'd call that out, and part of what I mentioned briefly earlier, but what you'll see with Smart Guide is that it's actually integrated into Smart Loop as well, right? So you might go on using Smart Loop and not see any notifications, not see any recommendations to make any changes, and that's perfectly fine. Or you might see some recommendations, in which case, again, hopefully those are clear. If they're not and you have questions, just write into us, right? Like, ask us for additional clarification. Ultimately, we want to help you get into a healthy zone in terms of how you're using our products and how you're running your marketing campaigns. So it's already integrated there. Again, the commitment we can make is to continue updating those best practices as they evolve and as we learn more in order to help guide folks towards whatever the right balance is.
Perfect. Okay. So here's a feature that I've loved since before the beginning of time, and that is interval pinning. And that works closely with board lists. So is it still okay to use those?
Yeah, so it's okay to use those. Again, Smart Guide, even in this first iteration, is already integrated into those features. So there might be specific situations where even if someone's like meta pinning strategy and frequency and so forth is good, you might on a specific pin get an alert or something that recommends revising some element of what you're doing in regards to interval pinning. One thing I will mention directly that we have changed in interval pinning is we have raised the minimum time interval between pins, and that's directly based on the best practices here and the guidance that we're receiving, that we felt like this was the right thing for members, and this is what's going to ultimately help people be successful in the long run. So we're making changes directly within the features, and it is even at that granular of a level where it's like, okay, when someone is taking this action within Tailwind, when they're leveraging this feature, how do we have to guide them to make sure that they don't accidentally do something that might ultimately cause a negative effect? Or conversely, as Smart Guide continues developing, how do we help someone unlock additional opportunity to have a greater impact and to be able to benefit more pinners? So yeah, it's going to be integrated directly into those features is the short answer. But this is something that we're looking at from a holistic perspective.
Wonderful. Well, I can't wait to see where this goes, Danny. Now, again, if we haven't answered your question and Lucy didn't answer your questions, please send us a note, type form, bit.ly, and I can't see the URL and I can't remember what it was, but we have people in the comments who are sharing it all the time. So please do fill that out. Comment on the live if you like. There also may be some more little questions answered on the blog. So if you go to blog.tailwindapp.com, also just go ahead and log into your account. So tailwindapp.com, poke around and see if you can see Smart Guide. Mm-hmm. If you don't have Tailwind, sign up for a free trial and check it out. See how your pinning practices stack up against best practices. So is there anything else you wanted to say, Danny?
I think just generally, I'm really grateful for everyone who did join us today. One thing I will say here is I'm sure a lot of folks weren't able to make it today. So, please feel free to share this, point back to it. Let this be a resource for you and for others, because I know one of the questions we always get is where is this guideline? Where is this best practice actually detailed? Where is it published? And so I think it's really helpful, again, that this was a co-announcement with Pinterest, and that you can come back to this and say, okay, yeah, here it is. Here's where we're hearing it. Here's where the guidance is coming. Hopefully that's helpful. But again, please bend our ear, right? Like, if you have additional questions, if you have concerns, if you're going through the experience and you do get some recommendations from Smart Guide and you're not clear on what they are, just reach out to us. We're here to help. We're on your team. And we want to make any adaptation that might be necessary as easy as humanly possible.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks for coming out today, Danny. appreciate having you here. And thank you, Jeff, for managing things so smoothly in the background. And thank you mostly to all of you who came out to hear right from Pinterest today. It was a great opportunity, and we will see you again in a couple weeks. Take care.
And thank you, Elisa, for fighting through the not feeling so well. We all appreciate you being here.
Thanks. Bye.